It's alive! Etc., cliches and whatnot. Frankenstein! Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, to be specific. Out on Netflix now! I saw it over the weekend. It's good. Not a huge shock. Guillermo del Toro is very, very good with monsters. I think what I want to do, like right out the gate, is I want to set expectations. I legitimately think the people who are going to get the most out of this are probably people who have either only seen the like classic Universal, the black and white Frankenstein, and maybe Bride of Frankenstein, or they only kind of know Frankenstein through cultural osmosis, like the generic things we kind of all know. Or honestly, if they've only ever seen bad Frankenstein movies, that might help too. But I think people who know the book, like not just read it once, but know the book and or have seen multiple adaptations of it. I'm not going to say there's nothing here for you. I do think you're going to get less out of it, though. This is the kind of thing where if you have a very narrow understanding of what Frankenstein is, this could really open it up for you a lot. For me, I have seen quite a few different iterations of Frankenstein, and I have read the book. So for me, all right, I'm gonna make a comparison that sounds like a dig, and I don't mean it as one. I do not mean this negatively. This kind of reminded me of Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Now, what I mean by that is you have a director who has a very strong personal aesthetic. And that personal aesthetic is such that you find yourself thinking, ooh, I bet he'd be a really good fit for this story. And then he does that story, and it's basically just that story with his aesthetic plastered on top of it. Like a little few alterations here or there, but it's more or less the story you would expect, just soaked in their aesthetic. That's what Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is. That's what Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is. Now, this is much better than Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, just to be clear. But hopefully the way that I explained it kind of makes sense for people. Because this is Gothic to the max. Like, this is maximalist Gothic artistry in terms of everything from the heavy shadows and the architecture and the way shots are composed and the lighting and the theme, like Gothic top to bottom, like Gothic with a capital G. It's soaked in that. And it certainly has stuff that is less commonly used in adaptations, like, say, the framing device at the North Pole. But that does still crop up in some adaptations. But, you know, that's here. I honestly really like the monster. Interestingly, a lot of the iconic stuff that we think about Frankenstein, things like using the lightning and, the visible stitching holding him together, that's not from the book. That's from the movie. That's not to say that you can't imagine that those things happen in the book. The book actually kind of massively glosses over how Victor Frankenstein does this. It's pretty glossed over pretty quickly. And it's not that you can't imagine the creature as having stitching and or scarring. It's just not really described that way at all in the book. But it was an embellishment that became iconic from the movies. Now, this obviously keeps the lightning. That has become, I think, probably too iconic to ditch. But when I think of something like the scarring, there is Guillermo del Toro does what he's very good at and brings a kind of beauty to the creature. Like, you can tell slight discoloration between different patches of flesh sewn together. And it's not, you don't see stitching, but there is scarring at the joins. And it is oddly beautiful, which is kind of what I expect from him. I don't know the actor playing the creature, but he's very good. He brings a lot across with the eyes. Oh, the eyes are a great touch because like just at certain points in certain lighting, there'll be like a gold tint to them when the light catches it just right. I'm like, I see you. I see you, Guillermo. I know what you're doing there. Again, if you've read the book, that makes more sense. But like that's a detail I don't recall coming up in actually any other movie. But it's also a fairly small detail. But still, it's cool to see. I like that. I would say the aspect of this that got the most tinkered with is Elizabeth, who traditionally, in the original book and in most adaptations, is a love interest for Victor. She's not here, like at all. That's kind of a little bit of a spoiler because if you go in knowing the original story, you're expecting what starts out as kind of this antagonistic, thing to become not quite enemies to lovers, but like, the flower that blooms in adversity blooms all the brighter sort of thing. Yeah, how like in every rom-com ever, they start out not really liking each other. Yeah, it feels like it's going to be that, but it just doesn't. Like he starts to become infatuated with her. She never turns around on him. I actually really like it because she sees through him pretty much immediately and through the entire movie. Now, a lot of times when you have a character who's kind of an arrogant prick, and I were to say to you, there is a character who sees right through them, and you might think like, oh, like sees through the bravado and to the heart and the soul. Like, no, she sees through the bravado and sees the asshole at the heart of him, because Victor, Oscar Isaac as Victor, is a raging asshole. He is awful, and it's great. I would say this is probably the worst that I've seen Victor depicted in terms of how bad of a person he is. Now, it's not 100%. He is not completely lacking in redeemable qualities. He has a few, and he has a few moments where you can definitely tell he is trying, or like has a moment of trying to do better than he is, but he is an innately selfish, impatient, just vicious human being. His ambition will burn down the world, and he will not bother to look up from his work long enough to realize that's what's been going on. And even if you tell him that's what's happening, he will ignore you. He is not a good guy at all. And I like it. I like it as an interpretation, especially if you're going to centralize the monster and have the idea that the monster isn't that much of a monster not be a twist, and have it be pretty evident almost as soon as the thing is able to get up and start walking. It's clear that it's not a monster. But Victor is. I would say Victor is probably the least wholly monstrous of Guillermo del Toro's human monsters, because you watch Guillermo del Toro movies, you know the monster's never the monster. There is a human being who is the monster. That's, Jacinto in Devil's Backbone. That is the captain in Pan's Labyrinth. That is the G-Man, the government man in The Shape of Water. Like, these are the real monsters of these stories. And they're just people. And Victor is the monster of the story, but he's one of, I think, the least wholly monstrous of these kinds of characters that Del Toro has put together. And I think he balances that really well. The one other thing I'll say about Elizabeth is that while I think that what the story does with her is interesting, where it ultimately goes is kind of underwhelming. Like, where her story, what it culminates in is frankly kind of weak, if I'm being honest. Like, it was a really interesting and neat swerve for her as a character. And also, Victor's brother William kind of ties into that. They've aged William up a lot. Normally, William is very, very young. Here, he is an adult, and Elizabeth is actually his fiance, which also makes Victor the kind of jackass that tries to steal his little brother's fiance away. Yeah, he would. But where things ultimately go with her story, it just, it's just kind of weak. It's not awful, but it just felt like she deserved better than where her story kind of wraps up. I'll just say that. Um, what else? What else? What else? Oh, Christoph Waltz is in this, doing a pretty solid job as sort of the financier behind Victor's current project, the benefactor. I did not predict where things were going with. Well, I predict a little bit of where things were going with him. Then there was other stuff that went on with him, and I was like, oh, dang, okay, not what I called. Cool. David Bradley is in this as the blind man. Those sequences were really beautiful. And also, like, I guess this is a bit more of a spoiler because I'm about to talk about something that happens at the very end. But then again, if you've seen enough Frankenstein movies, you know what this stuff kind of entails, and or read the book. But if at this point, I am going to say I'm going to start flat out talking about the ending. Okay, so consider that your spoiler warning if you didn't already dip out. So there's a moment that happens at the end, which is the kind of thing that would normally tick me off. And it became one of those moments that reminded me, like, it's not that this trope is always bad. It's that most stories do it badly. So at the end, as Victor is dying, the creature forgives him. And that's the kind of thing that has a tendency to tick me off. At its worst, if you've seen me on my main channel go off on the Doctor Who episode, The Idiot's Lantern, at its absolute worst, it takes the form of either or both. You have to forgive them because he's family, and you have to forgive family. For all intents and purposes, Victor is the creature's father. And in fact, shortly before the forgiveness, he addresses the creature as his son. The creature calls him father. So you have to forgive them. They're family. No, you don't. But like, that's one thing. And then the other thing is like, oh, but you have to forgive them to unburden yourself. You can't be free until you have forgiven them. Screw that. I reject both of those premises. But this found a way to make it work, that the creature forgives him in a way that actually landed right. Because more than anything, it comes down to the blind man. Because the scenes between the creature and the blind man are really, really well done and really beautiful. And there's this tremendous sadness in the blind man talking about how he himself doesn't think that he's a good person. He's done bad things. And he has to forgive himself because the people who he wronged are no longer here to be able to forgive him. And he has to try and move forward with that. And he talks to the creature about the power and the importance of forgiveness. So when Victor is forgiven by the creature at the end, that felt far more to me like the creature honoring and remembering his friend, his one true connected friend, than it did anything to do with Victor. And it made the moment work in a situation where under so many other circumstances, I would have thrown my arms up and gone, oh, come on. But I didn't. It was solid. It was real good. I liked that. Performances are great. Movie looks fantastic. It's not top tier Del Toro for me. Like his best works in my mind are things like Pan's Labyrinth. Like, I think Shape of Water is his best movie personally, but Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, Devil's Backbone, I think those are his best works. Here's what I will say about this movie. I think this is a top tier Frankenstein movie. Again, not particularly surprising if you're very familiar with the story. So if you're expecting some big reinvention, you need to set that aside. But I do think this is a top tier Frankenstein. It's a top tier Frankenstein movie and a mid-tier Guillermo del Toro movie. Keeping in mind that a mid-tier Guillermo del Toro movie is still better than most movies. Okay. It was good. It took me a little while to settle in, like, okay, he is basically just doing the book with a few tweaks. Okay, and kind of once I settled into accepted that, yeah, no, it's quite good. It's gorgeous. Looks great. Good performances. He's so good at this. Frankenstein, what'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe even. You know, don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to shout out my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and starting this month, I'm going to shout out 3 random supporters from the other tiers. So this month, my thanks to Tommy Castronova, Tim Price, and Caramelized Catherine. If you want to hear me shout you out, check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. You know, I put them one on each shoulder, they consolidated immediately. So, thanks, guys.